biggest issues we often see when working with employers is the issue of independent contract worker misclassification. And so I thought it'd be a worthwhile activity to ask the question of what is independent contract worker misclassification and why should organizations care? Well, the answer to what independent contract misclassification is when you have an independent contractor that is reclassified as an employee of your organization versus being an external consultant, contract worker, or a vendor. And the reason why organizations should care about this topic is really when you're engaging with an independent contractor or a consultant, often many companies falsely assume that they really don't have any employer responsibilities for that external worker. And they assume that that independent contractor or that worker is paying all their taxes, has insurances, is making investments in their business, and actually working as a small business versus potentially looking more like an employee of their organization. Well, what's really driving organizations to really focus on this area of their contingent workforce is really the changing government and regulatory landscape that is really forcing more employer responsibilities on organizations that haven't really done their due diligence in the classification of these workers. And so with the increase in enforcement activity, it's creating a lot more legislation and enforcement of truly looking at the nature of the working relationship between the employer and the worker versus just seeing what's written on a contract or on a handshake or an invoicing relationship. And with the enforcement that's happening, what a lot of the government agencies have been coming up with is that more and more of these workers that companies and organizations thought were independent external workers that they had no employer relationship with are actually being deemed employees of the organization and creating a massive amount of liability when it comes to payroll taxes that are due, potentially liability around non-compliance or violations with employment standards acts around the world, especially when it comes into overtime. If you have a highly paid contract worker that is $50 or $60 an hour, and the legislation in that jurisdiction says that overtime for an employee is a time and a half, that's a $25 or $30 per hour cost that you're going to have to bear in paying that person time and a half if that's the legislation in that jurisdiction. So there's a lot of employer responsibilities that are potential liabilities if you are not properly classifying these workers and truly doing your due diligence in classifying independent contractors so that they truly are independent and acting as a vendor to client relationship versus potentially having them deemed as an employee of your organization.